The story kicks off with an overpowered fighter stomping his foot and stating that a small fry will always be a small fry, no matter how of them are up against you or even however good their formation might be. The bearded fighter also has our hero Wilk right next to him, and he says that he won't understand their power unless he feels it in his bones. It turns out that this bearded man is our hero's grandfather who is about to face off against some opponents. Wilk and his grandfather both unleash their most overpowered fire moves, and we can see that our hero has a strong blue energy around him. There are explosions everywhere on the battlefield, but we need some context, so Wilk decides to explain that he is a magic user in this world. He has joined the war, but he was Japanese at one point when he was living on Earth. Now, he has been reincarnated into this world, so he has to live the ways of a fantasy life. He doesn't know how this had happened to him because he was a bit under the influence at the time. All he can recall is that he had gotten onto the last train for the night in his drunken condition. After losing his life, he was lucky enough to be reincarnated into a noble family. As a matter of fact, Wilk is the heir of Marquis Luke's Cordons of the Levio's kingdom. On top of that, he also has an amazing cheat power which makes him better than most around him. Of course, now that he has such a great position, he needs to protect it as well. It would be a really long story if he got into the details, but his efforts have definitely paid off. He has made the most of the knowledge he had from Japan, and has also established a strong level of trust with his parents. On top of that, magic, wealth, and power have all led to his new life being like a dream come true. There is one problem though, and we see that in the form of one of our heroes' chats. Wilk is called to his father's room, and the Marquis is pleased to see that his son is on time as usual. He asks Wilk to sit down and goes on to explain that the product he had made earlier has built a strong reputation not just over here, but in other kingdoms as well. Our hero is glad to hear this, but Luke comes up with a new task for him. In a few years, he will need to choose a suitable girl for marriage, but Wilk doesn't seem too keen on this. His father takes note of this and asks him if there is any problem. As expected, this is only going to be a political marriage, which Wilk has no interest in. However, he is not in a position to comment on such a thing. Of course, he has intrusive thoughts just like any other boy or girl out there, but it's way too early for him to think about it now. Basically, he doesn't see any profits in marrying someone right now, because the Marquis and his interests come first. However, he won't mind if the girl is cute and curvy. Luke is a bit puzzled to see his son like this, but then he realizes that Wilk has had no contact with young girls from any other territory. It doesn't matter now because Wilk will need to learn about women as soon as he can. After all, it would be a huge shame if our hero doesn't know what to do with his wife during their first night together. Luke activates his dad mode and tells Wilk that he should practice with a girl as soon as possible. It doesn't matter if she is from around the castle or even one of the cute maids. What's important is the practice necessary to become a man of pride and honor. Of course, Wilk could never have imagined such a thing, so Luke suggests that he should ask a person named Tesh for advice before doing anything else. This is because Wilk will need to avoid the girls who have a certain background. Wilk thanks his father for his dad advice, but thinks to himself that aristocrats have no sense of shame. Wilk is glad that the talk is over, so he decides to leave the room, but Luke decides to give him some more dad advice before he embarks on his new mission. He says that Wilk should try to find an experienced woman who can do all the work for him, and even suggests doing shady things. Of course, it's always better to ask first, but Luke's face suggests he's let his intrusive thoughts get the better of him before. Wilk shuts the door and forms a shady face of his own, because his new life in another world could not have gone better. However, there is still one problem, which is the fact that Wilk's elephant doesn't know when to put its trunk down. After all, he is going through puberty right now, which is an important time for any young boy. Of course, he could embark on solo adventures back on Earth, but in this world, there are too many slaves taking care of him, so he does not have the freedom to get the job done freely. As per his life on Earth, he could experience the sweet nectar of manhood even at the age of 40. However, all of that is going to change now, as we finally see Tesh, who is the head butler of Wilk's slaves. He offers Wilk a cute, curvy girl, and says that it's his choice if he wishes to act upon his shady intentions with her. She is a candidate to be his personal slave, but if Wilk wants to choose a commoner, he will need to discuss it with Tesh first. After all, if our hero does shady things with such a girl, then she will need to be paid to keep her mouth shut. Apart from this, there is also the option to just buy a new slave for Wilk, which seems like a good idea to our hero. After all, since he has no experience, he might just mess it up with a commoner or a maid. If that happens, then they will start to gossip about his elephant skill, and that would be very embarrassing for our hero. He doesn't even want to think about how bad that can be, so buying a slave makes more sense. After all, she can be kept quiet to protect his dignity in front of the other girls. Now, we learn of a Viscount named Galliana, who has lots of slave trading groups in his territory. The girls from here are quite famous, so Marquis can contact the Viscount directly to broker a deal. Of course, a slave trader can't be invited to the royal castle, so the meeting is arranged in the Castletown villa instead. Wilk makes sure to consult Luke's before going ahead with this because it's a noble from another territory. The Marquis is fine with it as long as Wilk doesn't ask for a huge favor from the Viscount. Now, we see a member of the slave trading group Gondoran named Doran, who is here to provide with the best possible options from his variety of slaves. Wilk was expecting a lot from Doran, and from the look on his face, he is definitely happy with what's on offer. Doran asks for permission to introduce all of the slave girls, so our hero allows it. The girls are cute and curvy, just like Wilk had wanted them to do, but it seems like one of them has not been trained yet. Doran apologizes to Wilk for not disciplining this slave girl, but Wilk is fine with it. He does want to see the girl's face though, so Doran pulls off her cloak and Wilk sees her amazingly cute face. She also has a supremely curvy body, and is revealed to be an elf girl. Doran explains that she was taken from the northern area and is roughly the same age as Wilk. Since elves live a long life, it's even better for our hero, and the best for him is that she is still innocent. Wilk's intrusive thoughts start to take over because he has never seen an elf girl before. If she is this way now, then he can't even imagine how she would be like when she grows up. It looks like this elf girl is called Eve, but she does not say anything at first. Doran tries to get her to speak, but the first thing she says is that Wilk should not buy her, which comes as a huge shock to Wilk. Doran is in shambles after hearing this, as are the other slave girls, but none of that matters because Wilk ends up buying Eve anyway. Doran leaves with the other slave girls, and then Wilk prepares for his first night with Eve. Of course, the first plan of action is to get Eve cleaned properly, so she is sent to the bath. Tesh performs the due inspections and can say with certainty that there is nothing wrong with the slave girl. Wilk is glad to hear this, and then Tesh decides to explain the process of using his elephant on Eve's rose. Wilk acts shy and tells him that he won't make the mistake of choosing the wrong opening. He says he'll call Tesh if he needs anything. So the head butler decides to leave the room and call Eve inside. The slave girl enters the room and her appearance is more than enough to drive our hero crazy. He activates shady mode and prepares to act on his intrusive thoughts, but he must also maintain his composure if he wants to do things the right way. He asks Eve if she knows what they're about to do, but she doesn't say a thing. She is a bit hesitant, so our hero uses his magic with a slave crest to make sure she doesn't get any injuries. What follows is a session that makes our hero look more like a villain because his intrusive thoughts make him an intrusive boy. Eve finally submits to him, but he wants to tease her some more. Anyway, they get done with their business and then Wilk changes back into a shady boy from a demon boy. He is overjoyed to have broken his own seal and feels really good about himself. Now that he has his own father's approval, he can get to work on as many girls as he wants. It's late, So both Wilk and Eve get some rest. But soon enough, our hero can hear his slave girl talking in her sleep. She seems to be remembering her mother, and it makes Wilk wonder whether he has become an evil character. After all, he has lived around aristocrats ever since he was reincarnated into this world, which was more than 10 years ago. He has been so corrupted by his lifestyle that he does not even feel bad for Eve's situation. If he were to evaluate himself as per his life on Earth, then he should be in jail right now. Even with his elf awareness, he does not have the will to change, but he does want to at least fulfill his woman's wish. Since he can hear his slave girl talking about her mother, he decides to talk to Tesh the next day. He instructs him to give Eve good treatment and also to start a search party for her mother. It's the right choice because Tesh can get these things done with ease. It won't make things right, but it's something in Eve's favor. Now, we see Wilk roaming around the royal gardens when he hears someone call out to him. It turns out to be his family's eldest sister Fanny, who asks him if he has also come here to have some tea. The two of them sit together for a drink, and then Fanny mentions she heard about Wilk staying the night at the villa. She wanted to study with him, which is why she feels bad. But Wilk has many other things to feel bad about. Fanny gives a cute face and asks Wilk if she can come to his room after dinner. She wants to spend some time with her big brother, and her cuteness can melt anyone's heart, even a savage like Wilk. He still makes a shady face even when commenting on how cute his sister is, and he even thinks about stopping his intrusive thoughts forever. Of course, that's just one big lie, but it looks like Wilk does care for his sister. Now, Fanny asks her brother when their grandfather is coming back, but it's not an easy answer to give, so Wilk has to explain it to her properly. It turns out that he is a battle expert and is out fighting a war against the enemy forces. The opponent is the Marquis of Jinkin Empire, which is always trying to pick up a fight with this kingdom. The main reason for this is that Wilk's kingdom is not a pillar of the nation of this world. The structure of hierarchy over here is a bit different, as the king of each region is determined by the one who has the most power amongst the lords of that area. Since the royal family does not have a strong authority with them, they are always at war. Despite the stress that comes with dominating this kind of kingdom, Fanny is amazed to see how overpowered her grandfather is. She wishes to become like him one day because he gets to travel the world. However, Wilk states that there is no need for her to see such a world because it is filled with danger. He suggests going to the castle town if Fanny wants to explore other places, and she is happy to hear that. She wonders if it's fine for her to go outside the palace, so her brother says that he will talk to Luke about it. Now, Tesh walks into the room and reveals that the master has come back from his expedition. Also, he wishes to have an urgent chat with our hero, so he wonders what it might be. Fanny is also curious as to what is going on, but she can't go, so Wilk pats her on the head. He says that he has to leave now, but he's sure that their grandfather would love to talk to Fanny the next day. With that, Wilk leaves his sister and puts on his big boy pants to go meet his elders. He steps into the main room where Luke's is busy with his other colleagues, and he's glad to see that his son has finally made it. Wilk apologizes for barging in like this, and then he shifts his attention to his granddad, who is clearly very strong. His name is revealed to be Galfis, and he used to be the Marquis before Luke's. Galfis is pleased to see his grandkid after such a long time, and then he gets down to business. He says that he has tried to avoid putting Wilk in any kind of danger, but he would be very upset with himself if he failed to make his grandson stand on the battlefield once while growing up. Wilk knows what he means because it is not uncommon for boys his age to start fighting in wars. As a matter of fact, it's almost like a rite of passage for family members in this world. Luke decides to step in by saying Wilk should try to use his magic for the next mission, which is to conquer certain parts of the Jinkin Empire. Hearing all this talk about war makes our hero excited as he's ready to take on this new duty of his. He doesn't even feel nervous about the prospect of having to take the lives of other soldiers. After all, if he fears this kind of experience, then he will only become a nobody in the future. With that, our hero agrees to join the expedition, and he displays a strong sense of conviction in his eyes. This is good news for the men of the castle, and then Luke offers to entrust his son with 5,000 soldiers. We can see a bit of nervousness in Wilk, so Galfis tells him to chill out. He will even get a veteran to help with the army arrangements, so it's not like Wilk will have to do anything too reckless. Now, we move to the commercial city of Namban, where Wilk decides to go and have a look at the enemy forces. As per his calculations, he can assume there are around 120,000 enemy soldiers, which is a lot when compared to the 60,000 soldiers on his side. It's obvious that there is a huge difference in strength between the two sides, but he is told not to worry about it. The only problem is that there are magic users in the opposition as well, which makes things a bit tricky. After all, those who can use magic are considered to be the absolute existence in this fantasy world. They are shown to be a class that can control society with their amazing powers. Basically, one move from a magic user can decide the outcome of a war, which is why it's very important to learn about their existence and number of users for battle tactics. Wilk explains to us that in this world, magic is the most valuable skill that anyone can possess. It is because of this reason that he had chosen to work on his magic skills for such a long time, ever since he was a little boy. Thanks to all his hard work, Wilk has the kind of power that most other magic users can't even dream of. For added context, we are told that most of the humans in this world do not have any magic at all or a very small amount of it. If compared with normal magic users, it would be like putting a mouse up against a cat. It's all about the foundation, and if that isn't strong enough, then there is no way for the person to become a magic user. Now, Galfis takes a look at his opponents and thinks of them as small fry, so it seems as if this is going to be an easy win for our hero. Wilk is shocked to see how strong his granddad is, and then Galfis orders him to follow his moves, as he is now going to wake up his useless opponents. Now, the enemy forces can see someone approaching them, but they have no idea who they are. At first, they believe these people are coming here to surrender to them, which makes them wonder if the opposition is scared of their numbers. Of course, they couldn't be more wrong as they see the enemy flag being carried by the soldiers. This makes them realize that they're up against Wilk's family, so they need to be on their toes. The enemy soldiers start to panic and they have no idea what to do, even thought they have many more soldiers than Wilk and Galfis. This leads to further confusion, and then one of their men tries to escape the battle. He is stopped by his comrades, but he keeps asking them to let him go as he does not wish to fight the war. This is a rather odd sight, especially because the coward soldier seems to have a problem with the magic users involved in this battle. It's obviously Galfis he's talking about, because the old man has the reputation of a deadly beast in these parts of the world. We learn that he is also called the Red Demon of his kingdom because he looks like one himself, especially in his dragon armor. Suddenly, Galfis fires a warning shot, and it's strong enough to cause a massive explosion. That wrecks a lot of the enemy soldiers, and Galfis comments that they're too weak to even care about. He then turns to Wilk and asks him to give it a shot since this is as good as target practice for him. Our hero obeys his granddad and proceeds to channel his own magical powers. Wilk unleashes a fireball of his own, and it is just as deadly as that of Galfis. The explosion causes a lot of damage, and we can see it in full effect as the enemy soldiers run for their lives in the midst of all the destruction and chaos. Our hero takes one look at what he's done, and it sends chills down his spine. He takes a look at his hand and thinks about how dangerous his power truly is. Even he does not know what he is capable of, and seeing the damage he can cause only makes him wonder how far he can truly go. This makes Wilk thankful to be born into his family, which has allowed him to gain so much magical power. Galfis has crimson fire while Wilk has blue fire, both of which are now merging together to take over the plain terrain. What was once supposed to be a battleground has now become a dominated victory. Wilk had wondered what would happen in the war because he was sure that he was going to take the lives of some soldiers, but after actually getting the job done, he feels he has adapted way too easily into this world. His heart does not weep for those he has ended, but at the same time, he is not so cold that he would call his victims useless trash. Now, Galfist tells our hero to take it easy, which makes him a bit confused. That's when the Red Demon explains that their other soldiers also need to work if they want to earn their livelihood. Wilk understands the logic, so he allows the other soldiers to take over and attack the enemy while they are collapsing. It is a total sweep as no one from the other side can even match up to the knights fighting for Wilk. With no other choice, the enemy forces release their magic users for one last hurrah. That's when the knights decide to take countermeasures against them and bring out some new weapons that look a lot like rifles. This squad of soldiers is known as the Musketeer Squad, and they are the first ones on this continent to use such weapons. Since it's their first time in battle, Galfist wants to see how effective they are. The squad lands a few shots on the opposing commander, and he is hurt quite badly, but it's not as much damage as the team was hoping for. He wants to know what kind of weapon this is because it could do so much with just one shot. As expected, Wilk realizes that the weapon is not good enough to deal a fatal blow. He feels he should add more units to these guns, and that's when we learn that Wilk had used his knowledge from his previous life in order to create these rifles in the fantasy world, also known as musket guns. He had hoped for this gun to become unbeatable, but that was just a wishful dream because it's not at all dangerous. As a matter of fact, it is only as good as a pea shooter on the enemy's armor, so it makes Wilk sad that his invention is a failure. The commander now gets up from the attack and prepares to strike our hero's men with his own weapon. He is ready to wreak havoc, but before he can move further, he is blasted to ash by another attack from Wilk. The knights are pleased to see their young master in action, and they cheer for him. Wilk tells Galfist that he had to use this move because it would have taken a lot of work from their soldiers to take down that commander. This is all it takes for the enemy forces to retreat, as their best fighter has been reduced to dust. They run back to the castle and beg the guards to open the doors so that they can run to safety. They even push against the doors to make their way inside. And by now, Galfist's men have also reached the scene. They break into the castle and start with their invasion, but the Red Demon tells his commanders not to touch anything inside the wall, as the battle is now over. With the enemy forces in full submission, Galfist decides to spare their lives and take them as hostages. As expected, he wants to make money off his exploits by having all these men under him. It's a much faster victory than expected, but that's what happens when you deal with someone like Galfist. The Viscount of Galliana receives word of the victory and reveals that he was the one who incited this war by spreading rumors everywhere. He also realizes that he should be nice to Galfist and Wilk, otherwise they might come for him next. With the city finally surrendering to our hero, he has now won his first official battle. Since he's put in all this hard work, he would also like to have some fun as a reward. This can only mean one thing, and that's to act on his intrusive thoughts which have been building for a while. Now, we get into the details of the victory because something needs to be done about the knights who had surrendered to the Marquis of Cordons. After holding a conference to decide on what to do, the final conclusion is to restrict the movement of soldiers inside the city of Namban, which leads it to become oddly quiet. On the night of the second day since the victory, we see that Wilk has been invited to meet someone who has a secret camp. Wilk is formal in his approach, and then he raises a toast to his victory with this mystery person. It's a fine win for him, but he feels that he should be celebrating by drinking wine with cute girls who have curvy bodies. Instead, he finds himself with a fat, shady man who is revealed to be none other than Viscount Galliana, who is the head of the Levio's kingdom. Wilk explains that Galliana is a merchant right now, but had started off as a commoner. It doesn't matter how you look at him, he still comes across as shady, which is why our hero remains cautious. However, after speaking with him, Wilk feels that he is rational, realistic, and even easy to deal with. Galliana tries to win his way with Wilk by showing his knowledge and usefulness. However, he does have suspicious intentions, so after he praises Wilk's use of magic, he goes on to talk about the blue demon going to the tavern. By blue demon, he is referring to our hero because of his blue flames. Galliana states that the blue demon had gone to the tavern and cut off the head of a rebellion leader who was plotting something against their alliance. After that, the blue demon apparently went on a rampage and unleashed his powers on everyone else in that tavern, especially those who were guilty. But then, the cute waitress of the tavern stood in his way and told him about her love for the city, which does not intend to rebel against him. It was due to this bravery of hers that the blue demon chose not to harm her. Now, Galliana asks Wilk how much of this rumor has any truth to it. Our hero has a pale look on his face, which implies that he does have something to do with what the Viscount is saying. He blushes for a bit and then takes us to a flashback from the previous afternoon. Wilk had gone to the town with a few guards on an incognito mission. Basically, this mission was to violate some cute girls because he was at war for the past 10 days. Wilk needed to get rid of his intrusive thoughts, so he started to explore the city for any impressive girls. After some scouting around, it doesn't look like he can get what he's after, because there is no girl in sight that's cute enough to attract his attention. He does notice something odd though, which is the fact that the city is still operating as if nothing has happened. This city has been seized by the opponent and they are now under the control of another empire. But the people are still walking around as if all is well. Normally, this would be a cause for concern, but Wilk doesn't see it that way because he thinks the people of Namban are strong for carrying on with their lives. Since he's here now, there's no point in a wasted trip, so he decides to go to the bar for a quick drink. But he does not want any of his nights to sip on alcohol. Once that is cleared, they visit the local bar, which is filled with excited people. The vibe is nice, the drinks are good, and the food is also very yummy. As everyone goes around minding their own business, Wilk takes a look at his drink, which is a tea made from some flowers that have been picked up from around this area. The one who has made this tea is the bar girl named Anna, who is cute as well as curvy. She assumes our hero and his men to be the mercenaries hired by this city, since they have no idea about the tea that she has made for them. She says that it must be hard for them to keep fighting wars during such a time, and then she gets called over by all the other patrons of the bar. Wilk lays his eyes on Anna and gets a new wave of intrusive thoughts into his head. Suddenly, he and his men notice some of the patrons talking about the recent battle. These people are not happy with the way things have played out, and they get into an intense debate regarding what could have been done instead of surrendering the council. Suddenly, one of the men says that there is no point fighting about such things because the most useless people in this whole equation were the mercenary soldiers who could not do a single thing. This angers another patron who actually turns out to be a wounded mercenary, and he dares the critic man to repeat himself. He clearly has no problem in doing so, as he states that the mercenary soldiers were simple cowards who ran away from their duties as protectors of the city. A couple other men join in on the chat and tell the soldier that he should have just fought till his last breath, as that would have been the honorable thing to do. The mercenary simply tells these men to shut up because neither he nor any of the other men knew that Galfis would be leading the charge. If you know that the red demon of the empire is coming for you, then you would mostly not even join the fight. One thing leads to another as all the patrons of the bar start arguing over some issue or the other. Wilk and his men just watch on for now, but then the critic man says that the allied forces have Viscount Galliana, so he will find a way to help them out. He is actually the main hope of Namban City, but this confuses Wilk and his men because Galliana was actually a member of the council. It doesn't make sense that he will try to help the city out because there is no profit in doing so. Now, it's time for us to learn a bit about the city and its rules so that we can understand why Namban City is such a big deal. After all, the second emperor had fallen more than 20 years ago, and it had caused a disruption to the whole mapping of the city. This is how Namban turned into a one-border city in the space of one night. The lord of the time was actually very timid, and he didn't want to live on the front line, which was why eventually ran away. In doing so, he left all the people of the town behind, and they had no option but to pray for a peaceful life ahead with no worries about war. This was how they had decided to govern themselves without having to rely on any nobles. The plan actually worked out a lot better than most people would have thought, as the city did not get involved in any kind of crossfire and the stable security led to the lack of any enemy interest. The city turned into a trading center which was so amazing that it remained unbeatable for over 20 years. Of course, good times don't really last that long, and the old lord decided to come back to the city after learning that it's like a chicken that lays golden eggs. He came back with his army to steal Namban back into his filthy hands. Since the people of the city had to deal with a filthy noble as well, they needed to come up with something substantial. The only possible strategy was to wage a war against the old lord, so that's exactly what the people did. They fought long and hard for their independence, and after an arduous war, the common folk of Namban ended up winning against a noble. All of this is being said as a story by Anna, so the men of the bar become a bit emotional after hearing about the battles they've had to fight. The bar girl goes on to say that her city is the best place to live in because it does not bow down to aristocrats. Even though they are being seized right now, Anna says that she and her people will never surrender to Wilk's family. The men erupt into a cheer for the bar girl, and they promise not to lose against our hero's men. They also treat Anna as their prized mascot, so they will never let anything happen to her. Of course, all of this is just silly chatting because these people have no idea how powerful Wilk is. Our hero is still impressed that a city filled with commoners was able to take down a noble man and his army. However, what he wants to test first is to see if these people can actually walk the talk, or are just cowards hiding behind grand stories. Now, Anna turns to Wilk and his men to ask them about their stories. Wilk takes a sip of his tea and wonders how he should now approach the situation. It won't be interesting if he just reveals his whole identity right now, so he decides to become a villain first. He puts down his tea mug and Anna pays attention to what he has to say. That's when Wilk cheerfully says that he and his men are here for war to crush the people of Namban. With that, one of Wilk's knights takes the city's flag off the wall and steps on it with his foot. Anna is shocked to see this, so she asks the knights to stop what they are doing. Now, another one of Wilk's soldiers shows a document to the people of the bar and asks them what it is. One look at this piece of paper is more than enough to strike terror in the hearts of the bar patrons, and they all bend down in fear. They all beg for forgiveness, and Anna has no idea what's going on. Soon enough, Wilk acts on his intrusive thoughts and holds on to Anna while stating her speech was enough to consider the city folk as rebels. Of course, he's not going to let this pass, and he is about to activate demon mode. The men of the bar can't watch him do these unspeakable things to Anna, so they demand that he let her go. They are stopped by the mercenary knights who know this will be a huge mistake. Our hero has successfully transformed into a villain again, and he says that the city folk better be prepared to pay for their sins. They did just insult his family, so it's not like he's going to let them get away with it. The moment he uses the name of the Cordon's family, Anna and the other men begin to panic. This is Wilk's cue to show off some of his powers, so he summons his fire magic. The people of the bar are both amazed and scared to see what he is capable of, and soon enough, they start calling him the Blue Demon because of his blue flames. The mere sight of this is more than enough to make all the men run for their lives. They try to escape through the bar's main door, but Wilk already has his knight guarding it, so there is no way out. Some other men simply hide under the tables hoping for the best, and this amuses Wilk. He mocks the people of the city, because they were being brave and making fun of his family not too long ago. He'd assumed they would have some kind of courage, but the human race always betrays its expectations, which is why all we can see here is a bunch of cowards. Now, Wilk's knights take down a couple of the rowdy bar men, and they say that something should be done about the one man who started the whole idea of a rebellion. Wilk has some other idea in mind because he can sense a rebellious spirit in most of the other men as well. He has no issues in ending it all right now, so he turns to Anna and asks her what she thinks about the whole thing. After all, he believes that the only way to prevent future problems for him would be to slit all their throats in a second. Anna is filled with dreadful images in her head, and she doesn't want to lose the people of her city, so she begs Wilk to spare her and the city folk. She obviously did not know that he was from the Cordon's family, and she tries to justify her words by saying she was drunk. She begs for his mercy once again by stating everyone at the bar is drunk, which is why they didn't know better. Wilk can understand that it was all because of the beer and booze, but he still wonders what to do about it. Anna realizes that the only way to sort out the situation is to have a little chat with Wilk inside a private room. She suggests the same to him, and he is glad that she has made up her mind. They have a nice chat in the room, and then Wilk turns into a better mood. He shuts down demon mode and tells Anna to inform him if she has his baby. After all, he might have intrusive thoughts, but he would always provide for his own children. Anna asks him if he is ready to forgive the city for its misdoings, so Wilk says that he will consider it in the peaceful conference regarding Namban. He wants to know all the good things about the city, so he tells Anna that she will need to inform him about these things in the days leading up to the conference. He walks out of the room and all the men look at him with wonder. There is a lot of tension in the air, but Wilk diffuses it by saying he's willing to let these people off the hook. He will let it pass due to the fact that everyone is drunk, but he says that there will be no second chance. The men are very thankful to him for sparing their lives, and then Wilk goes to the bartender. He asks if Anna is single, and the man says yes because her husband had lost his life a couple of years ago due to an epidemic. This helps Wilk gain some sense out of a thing he thought was odd about Anna. Basically, in this world, women who are married or about to be married usually shave off excess leaves. Since Anna is of a ripe age, he had assumed that she would be spotless as well, but that wasn't the case, which made him wonder if something was the matter. After all, a cute and curvy girl like her will have no problems in finding a husband. Anyway, Wilk leaves the bar and tells everyone that Anna is his girl now, so nobody should even think about having an intrusive thought about her. Now that we're done with the flashback, we head to the present where Wilk explains to Galliana that the rumor he heard was simply an exaggerated version of the true story. The Viscount reveals that he was actually in the city at the same time as Wilk, so he wished to have seen our hero act like a villain. Wilk is surprised to hear that Galliana was also in the city because there is no reason for him to be there. Galliana reveals that he hadn't been to Namban in a while, so he decided to visit for nostalgia. He also has an old colleague who still works there, but that has shady memories attached to it. Wilk decides to change the topic, so he asks the Viscount for information on the council members of Namban. He is more than happy to share this intel, so we get another lesson on the workings of the city. It turns out that there are 10 council members, out of whom 5 are elected by the people based on their character and popularity, which is basically like an election. The other 5 members are then chosen by the ones who have already been elected into the council. Such people are usually for the purpose of trading, so the additional 5 members are usually big merchants with strong names. Basically, the council members who are chosen by the people of the city are the ones responsible for them. However, the other 5 members also hold the same amount power as they do. In other words, gaining a vote from the elected council is enough to secure a seat over here. Wilk notes the fact that Namban doesn't just focus on trading, but also thinks about the citizens living in it. Galliana nods in approval and states that Wilk took the words right out of his mouth. The Viscount shows his shady face once more and asks our hero how he plans to end the Nambonan situation with the council. He slips up here because Wilk now realizes that he is being evaluated by Galliana and this is not some kind of trial meeting. He comments that the Viscount doesn't know him as well as he thinks, but he still needs to come up with an answer. He thinks for a bit and then he says that there is one thing he would like to say. Of course, he has to explain what's in his own head first. The city had done well when they had taken on the wrath of their previous lord, but that wasn't the case when they came up against Wilk and Galfise. They lost the first battle so badly that they had no other choice but to surrender as soon as possible. What Galliana wants to know is what led the council to come to such a decision. It's actually a smart move because the Viscount does know some shady things about Wilk, so he's trying to evaluate him once again in order to have some insight about his character. Our hero can't take Galliana lightly, so he comes up with some options as to how he can answer him. Of course, if he was born as a genuine noble in this world, he would not have worried about the opinions of a commoner. However, Galliana does not want that kind of answer because he would not have asked this kind of question if that was the case. This chat actually reminds Wilk of the first time he had a chat with Galliana, which was the time he had spoken about buying a slave girl. He'd spent the whole night thinking about what to say, since he didn't want the Viscount to look down upon him. He's spent enough time thinking now though, so he decides to give an answer that nobody would expect from a noble. He tells Galliana that if he were to describe the actions of the Nambonan Council in one word, then it would be half-hearted. The Viscount is shocked to hear this, so he would like to know what kind of reason Wilk has for saying such a thing. This takes our hero back to his time at the bar. When he had seen the way Anna and the barmen speak so passionately about their city, he could sense that the people had a genuine love for Nambonan. They wanted to protect their home and were ready to fight for it as well, which is what stood out to him the most. On the other hand, the merchants didn't even have to think about their decision once, and gave up instantly. They only had their own interests in mind, and since they knew they could not win, they took the easy way out. Now, in the eyes of the citizens, they gave up too early, but in the eyes of the merchants, they gave up too late. Wilk and Galliana are now getting into some intense chatting because they both have understood the mindset of the merchants. The Viscount says that the council had a lot of work to do when it came to deciding on their surrender. If he was still in the council, then he would have come up with some other kind of solution. He would have used one of his connections to help him with funding and men in order to counter Wilk's family. All of this would have been behind the scenes, but Galliana would have made sure to act shady before going down. Wilk is a bit surprised to hear this, so he asks the Viscount if it's fine for him to say this to him. He says that he doesn't care about such things because he was the one who had leaked the information to Lux in the first place. It's a rather surprising turn of events as Galliana reveals his big secret about starting the war to a person who can become his enemy. Naturally, Wilk is a bit confused by this because Galliana has just exposed something outrageous. He never thought that the hope Nambonan had in the Viscount was because of a huge betrayal. He is still speechless, so Galliana explains that his moves follow the same logic that Wilk had mentioned before. It is best to make a move now rather than wait for the opposition to become aggressive. Since this plan did not work for Galliana, he knows it's best for him to come under the protection of Wilk's family. Similarly, the 5 council members had thought that it would be fine for them to lose their freedom as long as they could get by. Wilk starts to see sense in this, and he goes on to state that when the proposal to surrender was first submitted, the council did not reject it at all. The one who had come up with the idea was a nominee whom they believed would never win. Even so, the council members would have known that the people of Nambonan would not want to give their city away just like that. It's all about trust after all, so they eventually decided to reject the proposal and start the war that Galfis and Wilk had to win. Galliana feels that if the council members lost a war that they started, then it would become a huge problem for them, so it would not make sense for them to do it. Of course, our hero is way ahead of him and states that it was because of this very reason why the council decided to have the war. This was all a big ploy to make the citizens of Namban agree with them. By starting such a huge war and losing with so much ease, the citizens of the city would finally understand that they are fighting against the most overpowered family in their world. It was even better for the loss to have been at such a scale, because if the people of the town start to talk about surrendering, then even the council members have something to go by. One thing still bothers Wilk, which is the fact that a lot of sacrifices were already made in the first war, which Galfis managed to win all by himself. It did not make sense for the city to rely on mercenaries for the second war, especially because those men were not even part of the community. That's when the Viscount reveals that the council members couldn't make it outside the city due to the soldiers that were already positioned at the gate. Galliana is shown to be quite the savage, because he states that he wouldn't mind sending the civilians to battle as well. He doesn't care if lives are lost, and he'd even bring back the bodies to the city just to spread fear. Wilk can see why he thinks that, despite the method being quite cruel. After all, a noble would not consider any man to be useful if he does not possess any magical powers. Now, Wilk thinks back to what Anna had said about her people defeating a noble in battle. She was quite silly to believe that she could take on Wilk and his family, especially with mercenaries who were too scared to go against the Cordon's name. Now, Galliana states that there is a difference between snakes and worms, even if they look the same. The battle may not have made any changes to the public sentiment, but it did shake the foundations of the council members. As a matter of fact, the main reason why they agreed to surrender was because they did not want any of the other citizens to lose their lives. However, the citizens were still living in a dream, so they could not accept the fact that they had lost. Instead, the young volunteers decided to storm the council instead of protecting the city's gates. It was because of this foolish decision that the Allied forces were able to take down the gate without breaking a sweat. This only ended up being an assist for the Allied forces, because the council members lost their only hope of negotiation, which was defense. Basically, the council had to deal with two problems at the same time. The first one was their citizens who gave up the fight too soon, and the second one was the merchants who gave away their only bargaining chip by losing the war with such disgrace. Of course, this only makes the Viscount happy for leaving the council at the right time, because he would not have liked to deal with such a situation at all. None of this matters to our hero though, because he would have won the war either way with his powers. It would have been easier if everyone had just made a firm decision, whether it was to resist or surrender, but Wilk will take it either way. He does thank the council for giving him a team which is so half-baked that they can't even come up with their own decisions. He walks us through the various situations that would have happened if the citizens had chosen either way, but it doesn't really come out well for them on both ends. After all, with warriors like Galfis and Wilk, no one in this world can ever hope to come out on top against the Cordon's family. The worst-case scenario would have been for Wilk and his granddad to end the lives of everyone in the city, but that would not have felt like a real win at all. With this, Galliana tells our hero that he had a great talk with him and is pleased to see that he can think like a normal citizen, despite being a noble. Wilk is also happy to have answered the Viscount's question without giving too much away. With that, they raise their glasses and toast to a better future. Of course, there's a lot to consider here, which is why the Viscount made sense when he said that the nobles will need to lower their views to those of the citizens. Luckily for him, Wilk has had the experience of being an ordinary citizen in his past life, so he will be able to provide that perspective easily. There's also the fact that Viscount Galliana is actually a former commoner and upcoming aristocrat. As the conversation continues to move forward, the Viscount comments that Wilk is indeed different from all the other men he has spoken to, which makes him an interesting bet. He tosses a coin to see where it lands, but then we move to the next day before learning the result. Now, we see Wilk's dad making his way to Namban City, and he seems to be quite impressed with the way his son has handled things in the battlefield. Of course, he would expect nothing less from his own flesh and blood, but he still congratulates Wilk. It's time to start the council meeting and there is not a second to be wasted, so everyone gets to work as soon as possible. At first, it does not look like either side is ready to negotiate, but then again, that is just how the nobles behave. Now, Wilk's dad tells him to head to Viscount Galliana because he seems to have taken a liking to his style. He also says that our hero will only need to stand there and watch as the civilian officials will be the ones doing all the talking. That seems fair, but is it really a good idea for Wilk to